Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 28th of March of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And today the most important topic, and it is more and more discussions about the possible Russian offensive operation, the Russian greatest offensive operation that is going to take place very soon. And the sources, for example, the Times reported that it's time to talk about the fall of Kiev. The Times. The Scottish columnist in Martin predicts the fall of Kiev by the summer in the absence of supplies of weapons and ammunition from the West. So, according to Western countries, everybody understands that the Russians are going to start their offensive operation very soon. The question we have, when exactly the Russians are planning to do this. And, for example, by Zelensky, the Russians are planning to start their offensive operation in the late May or early June of 2024. But the thing is that the Russian Federation will go on the offensive before the summer. Ukraine is not ready to defend itself. We need help now. So those were the words of Zelensky. He understands that the situation is critical. Also, he added that Zelensky said that the Ukrainian forces are not ready. So the offensive operation is going to start in May. So let's say less than in 2 months, very likely. And what is happening right now with the military aid and military package that the Western countries promised to send Ukraine, but still hasn't managed to find a solution how to create a stable support. For example, Germany today announced the transfer of a new military aid package to Ukraine, not even enough for one unit. Full list ammunition for Leopard 2A6 of 18,000 of 155 millimeters ammunition. And if we compare this number of military ammunitions, we can say that the Russians use this amount of artillery shells just for 2 days, 2-3 days. When talking about, let's say, active phase of offensive operation, 2 days. When there is like more or less a stable situation, then it will be enough maybe for 3 or maybe even 4 days if it's needed to, let's say, to stretch the number of ammunition. So the second question is why the Ukrainians thinks and why the Western countries suppose that the Russians are going to attack and to start their offensive operation in May. Everything is simple. I'll try to explain to you. To understand this, first of all, I'll remind you that we discussed in the previous morning video that Ukrainians increased the number of used HIMARS systems all over the entire Ukraine to attack Russian positions in the southern part and so on. For example, on this video we can see 2 more destroyed Russian artillery systems somewhere to the south of Zaporozhye. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians managed to discover Russian radar and also destroy it as a result of FPV drone strike. If we go to Avdiivka direction, for example, and if we increase the numbers of updates, we're going to see significant number of FPV drones used in the area, which also confirms that Ukrainians recently managed to restore their possibilities with weapon. And once again, if we move further, let's say to Terny direction, to this area, and also if we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of months, we can see significant number of FPV drones used there. So I'm trying to say that currently the Ukrainians don't have problems with supply and support, but they understand that in the future, if the Western countries don't define the solution, they will basically stop receiving this amount, and this is going to be disaster. So the question is where the Ukrainians currently are taking their military aid. And everything is simple, as we discussed in the previous video. According to information we have, there are currently NATO military exercises on the border, and you know that there is a standards. We have military exercises. That means that we have some certain standards. 1 day of military exercises cost, let's say, I don't know, 155 millimeter shells or 1 million bullets of one military exercises. From one point of view, of course, there are very big, powerful group of forces, up to 90,000 soldiers were involved in that military operation, and the big number of forces, first of all, means significant number of, let's say, munition that this group requires. So from one side, you can, of course, train soldiers and to spend bullets, rounds, shells, tanks, and so on the ground in Poland on the training centers. But from the other side, you can, let's say, erase them from the balance sheet just with one papers and to send them somehow to Ukraine. And if you ask my opinion, I believe that this is exactly what is happening. You know that this is not something new. For example, in 2014, 2015, when not the Russians, but DPR and LPR started their fight fight with Ukraine. The Russians conducted the military exercises on the border with DPR and LPR. There were no official supply and support of weapon munition to those two, let's say, proxies, but we know that just because of the military exercises, the Russians were able to accumulate, concentrate forces on the border and to send, let's say, weapon as many as needed, as required. And they were erasing them from the balance sheet. On the papers, they were like military exercises, but in the reality, the Russians were sending munition to this region. So now the European countries are trying to do something like this. And once again, the question, so why Zelensky is saying that the Russians are planning to start offensive in May? Everything is simple as well. I'll remind you that the NATO exercises are going to be finished by the end of May. So somewhere in the beginning or by the end of May. So right exactly the NATO countries finish the military exercises. Right exactly the NATO countries will, let's say, waste the package, the munition and the warehouses and their stocks for these trainings. They will be forced to move back to their, let's say, original place of location. The Russians will start their offensive. So this is like very simple. And the sources are saying that the Russians are planning to attack Kharkiv. So based on what the sources are saying that the Russians are planning to attack here, and few important things. And the first of all, of course, is FABs. And when talking a week ago, let's say the same date, a week ago, Thursday, a week ago, we wasn't talking about use of any FAB in the town. So the Russians weren't using FABs in Kharkiv. They were bombing, let's say, the villages and buildings around Kharkiv, but not Kharkiv itself. And now today, just for this morning, we received at least 2 or 3 geolocations, 2 or 3 videos from the area of results of Russian FAB strikes, 3 videos to be more precise. On the previous one, we saw just the consequences, the damaged building. On this video, we can see the reduced building to ruins, and the people are filming. And currently, we can't say what the Russians were attacking, but on this video, we can see the arrival of FAB during the day, and we see that like this, the consequences of attack. So the Russians, furthermore, we got every day, every evening updates about Guerrilla strikes. So you might say, so what is the purpose of the FAB strikes? And the thing is that during the previous weeks, the Russians managed to destroy the 2 power plants in the area. The first one is the power plant number 5. We have lots of videos and photos of those strikes and how did everything happen. So basically, furthermore, we have another one. This one, Slobozhanska nuclear power plant, and this is Avdiivka power plant that was also destroyed by the Russians. So basically, Kharkiv is completely out of electricity, and we see lots of FAB strikes. And now the Russians are bombing Kharkiv with FAB, but they're doing this not massively, not hundreds or thousands of FABs every day. The Russians are trying to move in this, let's say, direction step by step, slowly. So now the cuts off from electricity in FABs plays just for one role, for one purpose: to force civilians to leave the town. So for now, the Russians, it's goal number 1. It's objective number 1 for the Russians: to force civilians to leave the town, to reduce the casualties among people. And as soon as, of course, the Russians are not going to wait when the civilians will leave the area. Obviously, the Russians will hold the same situation, hold the same pressure for another maybe 2 or 3 weeks, let's say during April. But the Russians need to start earlier. No, the Russians will not start until the end of NATO, let's say, trainings. They will try to start exactly after the end of the NATO trainings. And so that's why 1 month the Ukrainians have for evacuation, and after the Ukrainians evacuate, the Russians will run an offensive operation. To continue topic about the electricity and power plants, 2 more power plants were destroyed in the western part of Ukraine. 1 power plant in Burштyn, one of the biggest power plants in Europe and Ukraine as well, and Ladizhinska power plant also were destroyed. So we have that, and as you can see, these 2 power plants are located on the main energy traffic from the western part to the southern part of Ukraine. So the Russians do have some plans, and now they're trying to implement them. And before we start moving to the situation on the ground, important notes are coming from Russia. According to information we have, the evidence of a connection between the Crocus terrorists and Ukrainian nationalists has been established, reports the investigate committee. So very in time, the Russians managed to find the connection. They're saying that the terrorists received significant number of cryptocurrency from the territory of Ukraine. They managed to find this out. So now obviously the Russians will charge the some something to some authorities of Kiev, asking them to come to Moscow to provide some, I don't know, evidence or to provide some information. And of course they will refuse this, let's say, suggestion, and after that the Russians will start an offensive. And don't forget that May, 3 things are going to happen in May. Once again, the end of the NATO trainings, the 21st of May, the end of Zelensky legal power as a president of Ukraine, and possible Russian offensive operation. So we'll see what is going to be next. Now let's move to the situation on the ground. We have a lot of updates. And probably the most important updates are coming from Novomykhailivka area. The Russians are in offensive state. Today we got a lot of videos, a lot of geolocations confirming Russian progress in the area. On this video we can see, we will not watch the video due to losses and casualties among soldiers, so it's better not to show the videos. But anyway, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the farms in the northeastern part and over the trenches here. So the situation for the Ukrainians on the northern part is getting critical. And the critical part is not just that the Russians are closing the heads of a cauldron. The thing is that there is a river. This is Balka Svinyacha. This is the river, and now the Ukrainians lost possibilities to redeploy forces from the northern part to the southern part. They lost the connection with this stronghold. So basically, regarding the operational square, regarding some space on this direction, we understand that this space is useless for the Ukrainians because the space is under complete Russian control. So the next few days, the Russians are planning to move further to the west with the purpose to establish control over the trenches, over the Ukrainian fortifications, let's say, in this part of Novomykhailivka, and basically this is going to be the end, at least, of the northern progress. From this perspective, the Russians will establish fire control over the main road from Paraskoivka to Novomykhailivka, and then this is going to be like, but I think that by this time, the Ukrainians will abandon Novomykhailivka because they're also not stupid. They understand that it's better to save life and not to risk with the forces with one of the most powerful and experienced brigades like 79th and 72nd. On the southern part we have more geolocations as well. 2 very interesting geolocations. Let's take a look at this one. The Russians were bombing the southwestern part of Novomykhailivka using tall flamethrower systems, dealing significant damage to the Ukrainian armed forces there. And this is a part of artillery preparation before the next ground operation. So obviously everything under such a pressure was suppressed, and now it's time to start attacking. But the Russians, before attacking, of course, there was some risk to get onto the crossfire from the Ukrainian side, from these trenches, from these 3 lines. So that's why the Russians, before moving further to the southwestern part of Novomykhailivka, decided to clear the trenches in the 3 line, let's say this fortification Ukrainian belt. So during the previous days, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians mainly were concentrated to discover and to find Ukrainian anti-tank positions. And for example, in this video we can see how the Russians managed to discover another anti-tank position along this 3 line, and as a result of artillery strikes, that anti-tank position was destroyed. Now we understand that the Russians managed to, let's say, more or less secure the area, and now they can start offensive, something like this, with the purpose to enter the southwestern and the western part of Novomykhailivka and basically completely cut the Ukrainians in the central and the north central part of the village. When talking about the central part, we have more videos of clashes inside of the area. The Russians are pushing, so the days of Novomykhailivka are numbered. It's obviously. So let's wait. Obviously the battle for this village is going to be finished very soon, and then it's very interesting to understand what the Russians are planning to do next. Either to attack Vadiana and to Uglidar, or to attack Konstantinovka, or to have a short operational pause for regrouping. So we'll see. So anyway, the battle is about to be finished. Now we are moving further to the north in direction of Avdiivka, where the Russians also continue offensive operation. The Russians continue advancing to the west of Tonninka, to the west of Severne, towards the Ukrainian positions in Pervomayska. Very likely during the day they managed to achieve additional results, but without any geo confirmations or something like this. Furthermore, the Russians continue advancing in direction of Semyonovka. We got reports about the Russians entering the village from the south, and the Russians report entering the village from the north. We have some reports. We don't have any geolocations confirming this, but the reliable sources are saying about this. Today, during the day, we got reports that the Russians managed to establish complete control over Berdichi, but it's too early. I suppose that we're going to receive this update maybe tomorrow or the day after by the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. Very likely that maybe by Monday or Sunday, because the Ukrainians always counterattacks, trying to force the Russians to fall back. But we see that step by step, the situation develops in Russian favor, and the Ukrainians are losing. Also, I'll remind you that today the Ministry of Defense reported about additional destroyed Abrams, probably the 5th one in a row. And on this video, for example, we can see how the Russians discovered the Ukrainian Abrams tanks and how they destroyed them with FPV drone strikes. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians were conducting successful counter-artillery duels. Significant number of Ukrainian artillery systems that were attacking or supporting the Ukrainian defense to the west of Semyonovka were destroyed. On this video, we can see one Krasnopol hit as a result of attack, and one artillery system was destroyed. A little bit to the northwest, we see another Ukrainian artillery howitzer destroyed as a result of Krasnopol hit, and further to the northwest, additional artillery system was destroyed as a result of Lancet strike. So no chances for the Ukrainian artillery superiority for artillery at all. So we see that Ukrainians for now can't do anything with the Russian attack. The only thing the Ukrainians can do is to attack the infantry with FPV drones, and to tell the truth, they are dealing significant damage to the Russians. Very interesting report we also got from Russia. We have the icon here, but let's discuss this. The Russians managed to upgrade their Grad Tornado S systems. Before, they were using missiles for the purposes to attack with Tornado S, but now the Russians managed to upgrade their FAB 250. Imagine yourself, the Russians managed to upgrade FAB 250, and now the Russian multiple launch rocket systems can attack the Ukrainian positions with FAB. Not just aircraft, but also the, let's say, the weapon on the ground can attack the Ukrainians with FAB 250, and the distance, the length of the fly is more than 250 kilometers, or more than 90 kilometers, and this is of course much more cheaper in comparison with missiles, and they establish additional engine to this FAB 250, and of course this is like another game changer in the special military operation. And now we are moving further to the north, to Bakhmut-Artyomovsk direction. We have an interesting video from the central part of Ivanovska. On this video, for example, we can see the Ukraine attempt to counterattack, and the sources are saying that that counterattack took place maybe not during the previous day, but somewhere around the dates, and somehow the Ukrainians managed to answer even Ivanovska, and then the Russians start forcing the Ukrainians to fall back. So anyway, for now we're not going to change the color of map, we need more evidence, but according to some sources, maybe the Ukrainians managed to restore some positions in the village as a result of counteroffensives. We haven't received anything from Bogdanovka area, the Russians are in operational pause. And the Russians continue bombing and attacking Klishchiivka itself with flamethrower systems, and dealing significant damage, preparing the ground for further offensive operation. And of course, the most important updates are coming from Razdolovka direction. Another batch of FPV drone strikes we received from the area. The Russians are pushing, so I can't tell you for sure, but I believe that the days before the Russians started the ground operation in this area are numbered. Massive drone attack along the streets, river, fortifications, and everything in this area. The Ukrainians were completely damaged, completely defeated. Currently, I can't tell you for sure what happens in the brains of Ukrainian soldiers in the area, but very likely they are very unhappy with the current situation. You see, just imagine yourself the concentration of fire, different geolocations, FPV drone bombings, FPV drone strikes, significant number of losses among the Ukrainians, and so we'll see what is going to be next. And according to geolocations, once again, the Russians either are planning to move further to Razdolovka, to cross the Vasikovka river and to move to Fedorovka, and to establish complete control over the Russian side of the farms of Vasikovka on the Russian side. We have also two geolocations. So everything is about to start in this direction. Maybe if not today, that maybe tomorrow. Siversk direction, the Russians, after a few attempts to storm the area, decided to stop once again, to regroup. They start bombing and start shelling this area once again from the beginning. They discovered additional Ukrainian positions. So the thing is that you need to understand one thing, that it's not that the Russians can't attack, or they don't know where the Ukrainians. The thing is that the Ukrainians continue sending endless number of reserves and reinforcements to Bilogorovka. Not that the Russians can't, I don't know, find the Ukrainians who can't penetrate the defense belt. In the morning, the Russians destroyed another batch of Ukrainian soldiers, and before they are able to collect, let's say, another armored fist for attack, the Ukrainians bring additional reserves. So I must say that currently this area of the biggest and the heaviest losses, either from the Russian from the Ukrainian side, and mainly due to understanding from the Ukrainian side that this is the vital foothold, and if the Ukrainians lose Bilogorovka, they lose everything. But based on the number of updates and number of attempts to attack, we can make a conclusion that the Russians, at least now, are not going to give up, and they will try to finish this mission regarding the losses, regarding timings, regarding everything, because probably they understand this is the only way to attack Siversk and to finish the Siversk offensive operation. Liman Terny. We have Ukrainians FPV drone strikes, significant number of attacks. The Russians made an attempt to attack along between these two tree lines, and the Ukrainians basically stopped Russian attack using significant hundreds of FPV drones. And at least for now, the Russians were forced to fall back for regrouping, but they discovered Ukrainian positions. Now they will work them out, and after that they will make more attempts to attack. So this is the simple Russian tactics. Now I believe we get familiar with this, right? The Russians are getting to the line of combat contact, then the Russians start sending, let's say, 1 in 3 days armored convoy, 2 tanks with demining equipment, and 3, 2, 1, 4 personnel carriers. During the convoy movement, the Ukrainians start bombing and attacking them with FPV drones, with artillery. During this process, the Russians discovered the Ukrainian positions, and then the next 3 days, the Russians are trying to destroy the Ukrainian discovered, let's say, forces. Then the Russians make another attempt, and they're doing this every single day, another attempt until they capture this or that, let's say, territory. So this is like the Russian tactics. Simple, of course, as much as simple, but probably during this special military operation, during the current configuration of everything, probably this is the best solution, because there is no other option. Maybe I think that they're smart, they know what they're doing, but this is the only one way, as I see. And let's finish the video with different updates from Ukraine. Additional mobilization process. We discussed the Ukrainians decided not to adopt the demobilization law. They sent back the law for regrouping, for rechecking, for making some corrections. We have another photo of an official mobilization car Ukrainians are planning to use in the towns and cities for these purposes. And we have few more videos and let's say few more updates from the border. On the Romanian border, Moldovan-Romanian border, Ukrainians managed to capture additional batch of future Leopard or F-16 pilots. We have another mobilization in Khmelnytsky. 2 officers came to a man to the street, and at the same moment they just took him under the hands and sent him, I say, to a Leopard tank probably. And today we got also report from in Crimea, Russian Su-27, due to some malfunction, something happened to it. Maybe it was damaged, and the Su-27 fell down. The pilot managed to survive, nothing happened to him. So this is the situation. Once again, May is going to be very important. During the April, we're going to see lots of very interesting updates and things. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Put your likes to my Patreon. And have a good day. Bye bye.